Alrighty. Let's see what we got over here. I thought I heard something. Well, it looks like our team is capturing, or not capturing, but rushing the spawn and... Wait, what is this? Hi there. Looks like an M56. I'm gonna ram this guy. Ramming speed!
What rammed me? Oh no! It's a T-80!
What's up, N56? I'm gonna push you around.
No. I just want to play War Thunder.
Then you should be playing in 6.7.
Oh yes! I'm gonna get you now!
Huh? No. You're not gonna shoot my T-80.
I'm gonna... Oh.
Yeah. Well, mission accomplished. Howdy folks, Sauber here. Welcome back to the channel. So this video is going to be a little bit different than the others. I will start by saying I've wanted to cover this subject for quite a long time now. And I'm just now getting around to it. Well, I've actually tried twice before, but for various reasons, they just didn't meet my satisfactory requirements. But I guess third time's the charm, right? So I'm not really going to cover any particular video, although I am recycling some old footage from my T-80U. I was actually going to use this for like a sniper tactics video, but now I'm repurposing this footage for the topic I am going to discuss today. So without further ado, let's get into it. So for us players of War Thunder, whether if we've been playing for 7 days, 7 weeks, or 7 years, we've all seen War Thunder's ups and downs, right? Namely in regards to its many issues. Now granted, all games have their issues, but War Thunder is a unique exception to this. War Thunder has had issues from large, hard to solve problems such as the current balance issue at the time of the making of this video between 1960s helicopters such as the AH-1G to modern-day helicopters such as the Ka-50, to smaller and somewhat easy-to-fix problems such as repair costs, to even problems that were once a major problem for various reasons, but for various reasons are simply not talked about much anymore, such as Heat FS, once known as Cheat FS. Whatever the case, like any major game, War Thunder has had its share of problems, and like it or not, some of these problems are not going away anytime soon. But today I'm not here to discuss at length every problem, large and small and in between. Rather, I thought I would talk about the history of War Thunder, and why it is much harder to fix and balance today than it was 7 years ago, back in 2013. And when you think about it, it was not all that long ago that War Thunder was a much more simpler game back then than it is today. For a brief overview, back in 2013, there were no ATGMs, no air-to-air missiles, no MBTs, no tanks in general for that matter. There were no helicopters, no ships, etc. Back then, only aircraft were playable, and only 5 nations were available: US, Germany, USSR, Britain, and Japan. That's it. In addition, the most modern jets we had in-game at that time were the F-86A5 and the MiG-15. Yeah. War Thunder was a much more simpler game back then. But now, allow me to tell you briefly the major features that were added over the years, from 2013 up until the end of November of 2019. Due to the limited time available in this video, I will focus on major milestones only, and if applicable, only mention briefly well, I don't want to say popular issues, but issues that were discussed at length by the community. And apologies in advance if I miss anything. If I missed any major milestone between 2013 and 19, do let me know in the comments below. I would appreciate it. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, War Thunder was released into open beta in November of 2012. I don't know too much about the beta that preceded before that, because I joined just a few short months later in February of 2013. February 7th to be exact. I'll never forget it. War Thunder, as I've mentioned many times in the past, was really awesome to me. I was like, wow, this is cool, a whole new experience and the like. War Thunder really remained unchanged. Oh, and just to deviate a little, I meant to say the most, if I didn't say it already, sorry, the most modern jets we had were the F-86A5 and the MiG-15 in 2013. I think the Hawker Hunter and other similar jets weren't added until 2014. But I got that little hiccup out of the way, so let's continue on. War Thunder remained pretty much unchanged much of the course of 2013. They added mostly new aircraft, but not really a lot of mechanics. Tank closed beta testing was announced, I believe, in September or October of that year, but for various reasons, I just wasn't really interested in tanks at that time. Mainly because I heard the bad rap about World of Tanks, and to be honest, I knew next to nothing about tanks until War Thunder tanks were released the following year in 2014. But, as you know, once they were released, I was hooked. I love tanks and I love planes. Enough said. Tanks were an awesome addition to War Thunder. And they were added, I don't know the exact time, but I believe it was when I was briefly inactive in April of 2014. Hence, once I got into tanks, now I will admit it was a bit of a learning curve, but once I got the hang of it, tanks were really, really fun. And when tanks were added, the most modern tanks available in the game were the T54 Model 1951. Keep in mind that the T54 models 1947 and 1949 were not yet added until sometime later. After the 51 model was added, then they later added the 47 model and then the 49 model. So those were some interesting additions. And at that time, it was just USSR and German tanks. Mainly because they couldn't afford to add all tank nations in one go. Same was the case when they added naval and helicopter nations. Hence, interestingly enough, the most modern, or I guess you could say the top tier for the Germans, were the Tiger II 105 and the Panther II. Which, as you know, were two of the 4 German tanks, along with the Coelian and the Mouse, we'll miss you, Mouse, were removed from the game. Earlier this year in 2019. Now, when I say remove, I don't mean removed completely from the game. I mean just removed from research. So if you already owned them, like me, I owned all 4, you get to keep them. But if you didn't obtain them before they were removed, unless something changes, which I doubt, you'll never have an opportunity to earn them ever again. Feels bad, man. But that's a topic for a whole nother video. Later down the road, I believe it was in 2015, they added the first iteration of Cold War tanks. Not to be confused with the more modern MBTs like the MBT-70 or the M1 Abrams, but rather tanks like the M60, the Leopard 1, and the Soviet T-10M. Now, I'll never forget it, when those vehicles were added, they were a bit controversial, especially the Leopard 1, because unlike most other MBTs and tanks, the Leopard 1 was super fast, and allowed it to get into cover much quicker than most other tanks would. I believe it was also the one that started, you know, the age-old no armor is best armor. Because more likely than not, you would overpenetrate it. Unless you faced it head-on, you aim for the left side, well, your left side, but the Leopard 1's front right side where all the crew members were, or if you hit the ammunition rack. In most cases, the ammunition rack would be the better choice, but for reasons that are kind of sour to memory, or not sour, but I don't really remember too well the cause of it, but back then there was a major problem with the ammunition racks, and you could like turn the ammunition black, which if you did that today, guaranteed ammunition rack blow up, instantly destroying the tank. But back then you could do that, and more often than not, if you hit the ammo rack, even if it was black, that tank would not be destroyed. Yeah, those were the days. 2015 was also known, at least in my opinion, especially for when tanks would not properly render, there would be ghost tanks. And when I say ghost tanks, I'm not talking about like ghost shells we know today, but like for example, a tank would pop out a cover and on your end you would not see it, and by the time they would reappear, boom, you were dead. I'll try to see if I can find an example of this and link it in the description below. It was one of Fly's old videos of the Leopard 1, where he was expecting a T-10M to pop out. T-10M backed into cover, Fly decides to move in a little bit, and then out of the blue that T-10M just magically reappears and blows Fly up. Yeah, that was really common back then. And then, of course, you know, there was the issue with the Heat FS being known as Cheat FS, because when they were added, there was no composite armor in the game. That wouldn't be added until the end of 2017, 2 years later. And with the average heat shell being able to penetrate over 400 millimeters of armor, it could even penetrate the mouse with ease. And it also didn't help that Heat FS was also very, very expensive. At one point it was 2,100 lands per shot, but then after the community complained, instead of reducing it to like, let's say 900 silver per shot, it was down to 1,400 silver per shot. So you had to make sure your shots count if you used heat. And the unfortunate side was that there were some tanks that relied on Heat FS, particularly the T54s, because they did not have a decent APDS shell that the Leopard 1 and M60 had access to. But again, that's a whole nother topic of its own, but as you can guess, yeah, the Heat FS shells were quite a controversial addition, but were necessary addition if they were going to add composite armor later down the road. I won't go too deeply into that because, for one, it's an old topic that, for various reasons, a lot of people don't talk about anymore, but it is quite a complicated subject, needless to say. But, interestingly enough, nowadays, if you use a Heat FS shell, that very same one that once costed 2,100 silver per shot, now, it only costs 200 or 300 silver a shot. Much more cheaper to use than it was just 5 years ago. 4 or 5 years ago. It's crazy to think about that. And then, if I recall correctly, because do forgive me, I'm working off to the best of my memory here, but in 2015, then that's when they announced that they were going to add Naval Forces, in particular PT boats. And I don't remember if it was that year or 2016. I think it was in 2016 you could actually buy the boats. So that was an interesting addition. But unfortunately, the PT boats weren't well received. And people were complaining about it, you know, that they wanted their big ships, the Yamato, the Iowa, the Tirpitz, the Bismarck, you name it. But for various reasons, they could not add the big ships right away. And to be honest, if the community didn't say anything, I'm not even sure we would have such large ships like destroyers and even heavy cruisers that we have today. And to make matters even worse, when they did the so-called pre-beta, that also wasn't too well received. Because you had strict time schedules on when you could test the ships, which, don't get me wrong, that's not really the bad thing, but what the issue was is that if you pre-ordered some boats, like I did Kennedy's PT-109 and I think it's the Project 1124 BIS, American and Russian boats respectively, I had to wait like a whole year, maybe a year and a half, before I could even play those boats in, like, let's say a custom battle or a non-test battle. Yeah, that's a long time. Keep in mind that those boats, which at the time Gaijin saw as being the top tier, costed about $40. I got the... Well, that was the case for the PT-109, which I was grateful to receive as a gift from an old friend in-game. So that was really nice. And in the end, I only bought the Project 1124 for... At the time, they had a bonus price where it was only $15. So that was nice. But personally, I didn't really get into Naval all that much. Mainly because at the time when I had started playing in 2017, it really had a bunch of teething problems. And to be honest, personally, this is just my personal opinion. I know a bunch of people enjoy naval battles both at low tier and top tier, but for me personally, it just didn't appeal to me. It's like how some people, they don't play tanks, they only play aircraft. For other people, they just play tanks. They only play a minimum amount of aircraft. Everyone has their own tastes. Some people only like to play at top tier. Some people will progress to, let's say, mid tier, and then they stop there. Me just not playing Naval Forces, that's just me. That's just me. But now that I got that out of the way, let's move on. So then, I believe it was in 2016, then they added Atgm Carriers, namely the IT-1. This was a significant development because, if I recall correctly, gun stabilizers were not implemented at the time. So there was the problem with that, where even with vehicles that historically had a stabilizer, you would have to come to a complete stop to accurately fire a shell. That was a cool animation right there with the watchtower. But to accurately fire a shot, you would have to come to a complete stop because stabilizers were not added yet. But the main complaint was that ATGMs were so good and so accurate. This was long before the chemical warhead nerf, which I believe was introduced later in or early in 2017. Atgm carriers were absolutely wrecking everything. You saw people rushing in their IT-1s or even their M551 Sheridans and wreaking havoc on the battlefield. People complained about them so much that War Thunder made a change to which lasts ironically to this very day. All the ATGM carrier tanks, except the M551 Sheridan, were forcibly given the gun sights that they use in simulator battles, which in arcade and realistic, it's literally in the barrel, whereas in simulator, the gun sight is placed to where it would be located in real life. And I'm glad they have the option to where, if you're an arcade or realistic, you can use the arcade and realistic battle gun sight, which is in the barrel, or if you wanted to use the more realistic simulator battle one, which is a historically accurate gun sight, because sure, it is realistic and all, but personally, I prefer the sight inside the barrel, because that's what I've known for as long as I've been playing War Thunder, and it's more user-friendly for the sake of a video game. But, yeah. So, I believe it was also by this time, I could be wrong, it could have been later on or even earlier, when people started complaining about people using reserve vehicles to rush an enemy capture point, or even a neutral capture point, J out, and hop into a strike aircraft, and fire the heat rockets, which back then, you could fire a rocket, it would land 3 to 5 meters away from a tank and would instantly ammo rack it. This was long before they nerfed that and fixed that. But you could get as many as like 3 to 4 kills per fly-through, and if you got destroyed in your plane after that many kills, hey, no problem. You had more than enough points to spawn in yet another attacker. So people complained about that, and they tried their best to fix that, but for various reasons, in a way that kind of made it worse. In the sense that it heavily punished pilots simply because the mechanic was just too great. Or too great. It just worked too much in favor of them if they used strike aircraft, when really fixing the heat rockets was enough to get the job done. But that's again, that's a whole nother topic for another video. So moving on, in early 2017, they did the Rank 9 April Fools, or aka April Test event, where you could play the T-90A and the Leopard 2A5 and battle against each other and also fly helicopters. Later that year, in 2017, we got the MBT-70/KPZ-70, T64A, and Chieftain Mark 10. Those were some cool additions. Radically changed the battlefield for the better. Hey, kitty. And then later down the road, starting in early 2018, we received even more modern vehicles like the Leopard 2K, the M1 Abrams, and the T64B. Further down the road, we got even more modern modifications of those said vehicles. And then, if I recall correctly, at the end of 2018, yeah, that's correct. At the end of 2018, woo, we got helicopters. And like Naval, helicopters had their own teething problems, which unfortunately is still experiencing those issues today. But without jumping the gun a little, starting when helicopters were introduced last year, they tried two experimental modes, one in arcade and one in realistic. And then once they added air-to-air missiles for them, then, yeah, that added their own balance problems. And ultimately, they scrapped those two modes in favor for helicopter enduring confrontation. Which reminds me, I forgot to mention, also in January of December of 2018, they added the first iteration of supersonic jets and air-to-air missiles, when previously they said that air-to-air missiles would be hard to balance, but I guess through research and investigation, they found that they could be somewhat balanced as long as they added the missile lock warning, which, like it or not, I find it helpful, for the sake of it being a video game. Some people like it, some people don't, but I keep saying this, but I'll say it again. Once again, that's a whole nother topic for another video, but I'm trying to cover as much as possible, and my time is almost up, so I will keep going. So then, they added some more modern aircraft with an assortment of different missiles. And then finally, towards the end of 2019, we get Rank 7 tanks and Mach 2 jets. And also, in that course of time, I forgot to mention them. I apologize for that, because there's so much to mention in so little time. We got France as a new nation, Italy as a new nation, both for air and ground units. Most recently, we got the air and ground trees for China, and the the early release tree for Sweden. And at the time of the making of this video, it is not yet confirmed if Sweden will be added within the very next patch in December, the full release tree, but I think it's safe to say we will. Whew. That was a lot of stuff to mention, and I haven't even mentioned the exact details of what these new additions have made War Thunder much harder to maintain in balance today than they have back in 2013, but you get the general idea. Since I'm almost out of time in this video, in the following video I will try my best to mention in detail how the difference between 2013 and 2019, soon to be 2020, have affected War Thunder and made it much harder to balance today and fix than it was 7 years ago in 2013. So be sure to stay tuned for my next video in part 2, explaining not only those major changes then, and also briefly touching, if I have time, the issues of battle ranking and repair cost, why those are so difficult to balance with the current meta. So be sure to stay tuned for that video. But anyway, that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you're enjoying the video so far. I hope you have enjoyed my little brief overview of discussing the major changes of War Thunder between 2013 and 2019/2020. Again, I apologize if I missed something. If I did miss a major milestone or something that was a major addition to you, be sure to let me know and share with me in the comments below. I really would appreciate it. But anyway, that is it for today's video. Have a great day, stay safe, Stay tuned for part 2, and peace out.